Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Path of Conquest. With the update of 1.5 for Conquest Last Argument of Kings, we've revisited the Path of Conquest milestone videos, and this one is for the Dweghom. Once again, I'm joined by Neo from Para Bellum Wargames. So great to have you back on the channel. A lot of things changing and coming to the fore with the advent of the new rule set. But if people have been following and had already worked across the 6 milestones for the Dweghom, their army is still 100% valid. But there's some changes with the new rules that we've gone into a little bit in the 100 Kingdoms video. So if people want to see some of the changes, they can have a look at that video. I'll pop a link below. But specifically for the Dweghom then, Leo, what sort of things are they going to be looking at to change their army up?
If you're following the Path of Conquest, the milestones, then yeah, your army is perfectly playable, right? Everything is still there. It's one of the good things of knowing the guy that writes the rules, like, knowing what the things that stay updated. But right now with the Dweghom, like we did with the 100 Kingdoms and the Spires and the Wadrun, right? We want them to play as advertised. We want to bring their unique aesthetic and their unique lore into the game. Mm-hmm. And like we did with the other armies, we are bringing in some new faction special rules, right? Which is called the Dweghom Creed. Very interesting. 3 different ways to approach the game and 3 very, very deeply rooted in lore ways to really bring all the tenacity of the Dweghom to the tabletop. Fantastic. So I think that I'm just gonna the name for the first kind of creed. I don't think it's gonna surprise you. It's called the Pursuit of Agm, right? I mean, that's what the Dweghom is all about. This is pretty much what their entire life revolves around, and it's a very cool rule because it brings this new element in duels into the game.
Okay.
So the Pursuit of Agm, the rule is called Glory Seekers. Now, first of all, character stance in this army may not refuse duels. I mean, they're Dweghom. If they're challenged by anything, they want to be there, right? Mm-hmm. They're happy to be challenged to begin with. They're not going to say no. Then, so once per activation, so once per regiment, right? And when your regiment completes a class or charge action, so let's say you inspired in class, you charged in class, whatever that is, if your regiment has 3 command models, so let's say you have a leader that is now for free, a standard bearer, and I don't know, let's say a Herald of Stone, right? Mm-hmm. That regiment, that command stand, may issue a free duel action. So right now, let's say you are in a regiment of Thanes, right? And you have a leader, you have a standard bearer, you have a Herald of Stone, or whatever other upgrade you want to have in there. Now, after that class or charge is resolved as a free action, you can now also duel the enemy character. Challenge them to combat with everything that entails. If they say no, their regiment might get broken. If your class went particularly well and you broke the enemy regiment and then you issue a duel, right, they cannot say no because they're going to be shattered, right? So here's what happens. Now, if the command stand survives the duel, they gain the Bravery special rule.
Okay.
Right. So let me go through all of these and we'll talk a little bit about what they do. Mm-hmm. If the stand causes 1 or more wounds to the enemy character stand, the regiment gains the Indomitable special rule. And if the stand successfully removes the enemy character as a casualty, they gain the Tenacious special rule. So essentially, there are quite a few rules here. Mm-hmm. One rule essentially helps you diminish the effects of morale diminishing special abilities. The other ability tells you that when you're rolling resolve tests, you take 1 less, right? So you ignore 1 failed essentially. Mm-hmm. And the other one is when you're rolling for defense roll, you're taking one less point of damage, right? So it is a little bit like you're discarding one failed dice. And it's great because if your opponent has a chapter mage, even if you don't kill the chapter mage, if you just do one wound, suddenly you are in a lot, your regiment gets these incredible buffs. And I'm not even going to say what happens if there are Dragon Slayers, the ones that are issuing the challenge. Okay. The other great thing is that now the leader, instead of a reroll, does a +1 attack. Mm-hmm. So you have this extra little bit of attack there. You have the ability, the fact that you can actually issue duels. You have the fact that you gain the benefits of whatever command upgrade you have in there, and of course the benefits of whatever buff you have bestowed upon the regiment. And that all that is after you have already clashed against the enemy regiment.
And with those, is it always the top level that you would take? So if you've caused wounds and shattered or removed the enemy character,
they are, you take everything. You take everything.
Everything. So
everything.
All
so yeah, they're cumulative. Yeah. Wow. So, for example, if you issued a duel and you kill the enemy character, then that means that you have both survived.
Yes.
Or maybe even if they're quite lucky, maybe you don't. But let's say that you survive. You have both survived, caused a wound, and killed the enemy character. So that is all three.
It's definitely very Dweghom-ish. I can see an awful lot of people going to be a glory seeker out there.
I know, right?
But that's only the first of the.
It's just that you get a lot of opportunity to, first of all, many times, a lot of support characters are safe when they're away from enemy characters. Mm-hmm. But when you have that enemy Ferromancer, when you have that chapter mage, I'm not going to say what June character, because usually they're quite killy.
You're looking for squishy people.
Yeah. When you have these support characters, like even a Temper Sorcerer or Steel Shaper, right? You are putting a lot of pressure upon the enemy, right? To not have these regiments very, very much forward.
Yeah.
Right on the battle line, because if they come in, you can do some nasty combos. For example, Ardent Caraway can immediately break an enemy regiment, and then you can issue a duel, and essentially you're issuing a duel that your opponent cannot refuse. Otherwise, they're going to be shattered. Right? There's all these different, all this new kind of utility and all this new value that you take out of regiments, out of quite elite regiments. Now, Dragon Slayers are a real threat, not only towards enemy regiments, but because they can eliminate enemy characters. They can charge, class, essentially breaking a regiment and duel. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely, and of course, if you kill the enemy character stand in a duel, maybe sometimes that's the last stand that needs to go in order for the entire regiment to shatter. Yeah. So a very, very, very interesting rule, and it's one that sees a lot of play in competitive play as well.
I imagine it would, yeah. There's an awful lot to be said about being able to take out those support characters and do it not just efficiently, but also at the same time buffing or reinforcing the character and the regiment that has achieved that as well. So it
absolutely. And the next one is the Ardent Creed, right? So for example, the Ardent Creed could be either taken up by Caraway or Hold Ray. Mm-hmm. And essentially, and this is actually one of the rules that make the Dweghom, along with the Pursuit of Agni, very competitive, is that regiments in the army belonging to the Warlord's warband increase their march characteristics by 1. Mm-hmm. And all regiments in the army have the Gain the Unbound special rule. So essentially, the regiment ignores enemy regiments when determining the army's reinforcement line. Ooh. This is a game changer for the Dweghom, and it is very closely contested with the Glory Seekers. So to break it down a little bit, the Caraways or the Rise warband gets +1 march, which is very important. Usually, not having a lot of light regiment, actually the Inferno Automata being pretty much the prime candidate for light regiments, right?
Yeah.
That extra bit of march And if you think about it a little bit with the standard bearer as well, that gives you a +1 march on your second march as well. That means +3 march overall to get into position, which is very, very, very important and changes a lot for the Dweghom. And the other important thing is that if you gain the Unbound special rule, you no longer suffer the fact that other light regiments are slipping through your lines, right, and are messing up with your reinforcement line. It makes the Dweghom very, very difficult to dislodge from a position.
Yeah. I suppose it's one of those key aspects of warfare. It's about power at a point and position and maneuver. Generally, with the Dweghom being so, let's not say slow, let's say stoic, they stoically move forward. They often did feel that pressure on the lines and restricted where they were going, and so you're always reacting to what your opponent is doing. This creed is massive, allowing you not just to push further forward than they expect, but also to dictate where those battles are going to take place. And because the Dweghom as a force were essentially in the initial build of the last Argument of Kings, they were expected to sort of be a bit slower in arriving and to have to weather that storm. Now being further forward, being somewhere where your opponent doesn't expect, can be a real challenge to dislodge them then. Yeah.
Well, definitely. I think Berserkers are going to be so good with it. And it's just, if you think of that competitive play now plays on a larger table, right? It's very important for the Dweghom to find, a constant pace in which they can keep pushing right onto the middle of the field. They are not as present in the early game, although now with, Berserkers are going to be quite competitive there. But it was very important for the Dweghom, right, to have this option. So now you can either go for some very dangerous regiments, or you can go for good placement, very aggressive play style. And the third creed, one that focuses around the tempered sorcerers and the tempered steel shapers, it's called elemental potency. So essentially, every time this character performs spellcasting action, you gain a power marker. Now that power marker can be used to automatically pass a roll 6 inches away from the character. So if there is these extra shots, if there is these, for example, Fireforged make very good candidates with that, with torrential fire, with a flamecaster in there, you automatically pass a few hits, and suddenly you have these additional hits, right, that you can cause. It gives a lot of it streamlines a lot how you project your offensive power to be, and it's very important.
Sure. And that one, the elemental power markers, can you stockpile those then?
Yeah. Yeah, as long as you keep casting, you keep stockpiling, and it's just, you can unleash. You lose one per round, but you can always keep piling them up, and you can unleash literally everything. You're going to be casting regardless. So this is something, if you play heavy on sorcerers and so on, you're going to be casting regardless, and you're going to be using this. You're going to be using that ability, especially if you have a warlord as a temper sorcerer as a warlord.
It's interesting because it allows you the option then of either, I suppose, burning through, pardon the pun, the markers on a regular basis to chip away early, or holding off and generating a bit more momentum, and then sort of mid to late game having a really devastating attack for when you're looking to crack a particularly tough regiment.
And, if you think about, you can have a Hellbringer Drake that keeps, it keeps siphoning energy and to unleash it. If you have 3 markers, suddenly these are 3 powerful hits that are landing somewhere. So it's not, it's depending on where you use it, you have to stockpile it, you have to slowly build it, but you can unleash this amount of energy that can make a huge difference on the battlefield.
So that's our creeds for the Dweghom. But once again, they are combined with new supremacy abilities.
That's absolutely right. And so we saw for example, first of all, we have the Ardent Caraway, right? That we saw a little bit how they play with the Ardent Creed, but now their supremacy, righteous annihilation, right? A fitting name for anything that is Dweghom, right? It said, while the character is on the battlefield, all regiments in your army receive a +2 march to their first march action they perform every time they activate. So we're talking about some serious speed right now. And unlike what people, even though the Dweghom follow the dwarf archetype, sure. They're actually lore-wise and fighting-wise, they're not slow at all. They're very aggressive. They are to quote quote Gimli, they're naturally born sprinters. But actually, this is quite true for the Dweghom. They're very fast. They're very aggressive. They are slow in the sense that they don't get access to things like cavalry or things like that. But their infantry stoically and yet quite quickly get in position. And so, and in addition, all your regiments add two to their charge distance until the end of round when you declare that you're going to be using this part of the supremacy ability. Oh. So if you ever wanted to play Ardent full caraway, Inferno Automata, Berserkers, like everything that you were reading in the Tempered and the Ardent short stories, this is the playstyle for you.
That will catch an awful lot of people out. All of a sudden having a berserk force right in their face early game when they're still trying to position sort of light infantry or cavalry, to funnel the Dweghom later on. That has so many possibilities opening up for players.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite. And then we have Tempered Sorcerer, which is called Elemental Puissance. So every time the character activates, essentially they get an additional action, and that they could use 2 identical actions. So they can cast twice in this sense. And that works quite well with stockpiling, these markers, or just a lot more damage. This is pretty much the same with before. Going through that, we have the Tempered Steel Shaper with Living Metal. Essentially, once per game, your entire army heals for 4 wounds, which is... It is a lot considering that your entire army does it at once. Yeah. And that is your final few Dragon Slayers. That is just, especially with how defensive sometimes, the Dweghom can be, healing 4 wounds at a key moment can really mean keeping multiple objectives, right? And staying in the fight. And finally, and this is actually one of the options that is that has a lot of synergies with the creed, with different creeds, is that the Hold Raise ability, the Mountain Stance. So now Hold Faint regiments have their class changed to medium instead of heavy.
Okay.
That is very important, thinking that if you think the way that regiments are being costed in the last Argument of Kings, we always take into consideration what is their class, and therefore when during the game they will actually enter the game. So now Feints straight up become medium. They come into the game a lot faster. And if you think that the Hold Dry can have an Ardent Creed, so you can give them this extra move. There is a lot, you can play very aggressive with some very elite troops, and the Feints are quite sturdy. And in addition, heavy regiments in this army add +1 to their reinforcement rolls. Now, that's very, you can modify by an additional 1. That's very important. The supremacy ability is always considered to be active.
That is, again, I suppose it leans into that consistency of the Dweghom and getting what you want on the tabletop in a timely manner, and also the I suppose the brutality that the heavy regiments coming when you need them to arrive, because a delay can often, I was going to say knacker your army, but I suppose when you combine that with the other creed, where they can potentially push forward despite light troops coming on there, you can really dominate areas of the battlefield and force combats to occur where you want them to, rather than at the back of the board, potentially far away from an objective.
Yeah, and it's I love especially the hold race. I really like because with you can either use them with glory seekers, you can, and especially think of the extra bonuses that you get from the glory seekers onto Thanes, right? And then I'm thinking about either how aggressive, how hyper aggressive they can get, being part of an Ardent Creed, and it's just I really love how many different play styles there are and how different regiments are favored, going one way or the other. And this is why the Path of Conquest, the milestones were very important at creating this list that you can essentially now explore all of these different rules without really missing anything, while having a solid basis for you to add upon.
Fantastic stuff. Obviously, Dweghom players will be wanting to get their hands on this as quickly as they can. We have updated PDFs below, and if you go to Para Bellum's website, you can check out, obviously, the 1.5 version of the rules, if you haven't already, and the Army Builder, which will have all of those in there as well. That updates the Dweghom spectacularly well for 1.5 in Conquest, the Last Argument of Kings. We'll be back soon. Bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.